Hi, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Living Well series. I'm Tara Parker Pope, founding editor of Well, the Times consumer health section. Today, I'm really looking forward to our talk. I'm pleased to be bringing to you Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams, who is an ordained Zen priest and founder of the national social justice organization, Transformative Change. Hello, Reverend Angel.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, and I expect to be better by the end of this talk. So I'm really looking forward to this time together. I need to say hello to everyone listening. You can submit your questions for Reverend Angel using the Q&A feature in Zoom. So we're going to have a little conversation. I hope your questions come in. Then we're gonna take your questions. We're gonna have some moments of mindfulness. So stay with us. We'll start and end with some mindful moments with Reverend Angel, which will really be a great opportunity for everyone. I need to remind you that this event is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Please reach out to a health professional if you have any questions regarding any medical condition, any mental health condition. This event is also being recorded. So let's get started. Reverend Angel, tell me a little bit about, just so people get a sense of who you are in this world of mindfulness and meditation. I know you've written some books. You have the Transformative Change, the social justice organization, Transformative Change. Can you tell me a little bit about that work?
Yeah, Transformative Change is the organization that I started, it feels like forever ago now, somewhere around 2000. And its original name was Urban Peace Project, and the idea was that we really understood that many people, we weren't even talking about mindfulness in a big way, but meditation, that many people that lived in urban environments and people that were dealing with the kind of daily stresses of, urban living, people of color, Black folks, were not getting access to the what was at the time, meditation practices, yoga, and that kind of thing. And then particularly activists, the people that wanted to do justice, that wanted to go out in the world and make the world a better place, were stressed and overworked, and they weren't getting any access to the kinds of tools that could help them to navigate those situations. So we came up with this organization, first Urban Peace and then Transformative Change, which was meant to retool the tools that we had access to make them really available for the people that want to do good work in the world and make sure that they had practices that could create resilience and possibility for them, so that every single one of us can benefit from what they're doing.
And here we are 20 years later in this moment, which is what we're all, it's absolutely what we need in this moment. It sounds like you're we've probably needed it for 20 years, but I think more people are thinking about it right now. I'd like to start today. We talked about having, for the viewers, just to kind of get us all in the right headspace, maybe a brief moment of mindfulness, and then we'll start the conversation and taking questions. Would you like to lead that for a moment, and then I'll...
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's do that. I'm going to invite everyone because, wherever we were doing something else. And so this is a moment of transition. And I always encourage people to just mark transition with a mindful moment that allows us to center and bring ourselves present. And the way that I like to do that most briefly is to really invite us to just drop down into our bodies. And so I'll just walk through this very briefly. You can take yourself through it and listen to my words. There's no big instructions, so just follow along. The encouragement is to start with just feeling your feet, maybe wiggling your toes, and feeling your feet on the earth. And have that sense of rooting yourself to exactly where you are, whether you're sitting or standing. And also to feel your buttocks or your seat. Whether you're standing or sitting, to just connect to that three-dimensionality. We like to talk about taking our seat as a way of really setting intention. And as you're feeling into your seat and your sits bones, you can extend your crown towards the sky and feel that full length in your body. And in that length, connect to your own sense of dignity. You can use the breath to engage here as well by feeling your in-breath and drawing your shoulders up towards your ears and rolling them all the way back and allowing your body to be nice and wide to really feel the full width of your chest, and the exposure of opening your heart in that way and allowing your belly to be soft. And when we feel that, we really recognize that we're in relationship, first in the space that we're in, but also with everyone around us, near and far. You can take an in-breath again, and on the out-breath, allow your attention to rest in your belly. I like to say to abide in your belly, to just let your attention kind of rest in that soft belly. You can let your jaw be soft. You can let your neck be soft. You can let your shoulders be soft. Just a little bit more, along with a little bit of a softening of the belly. Feeling your own breath in your body, feeling the aliveness. And for just this period of time that we're together, bringing your, as much as your full attention as you can, bringing as much of your awareness as you can, holding it in your belly. If something comes up difficult, you can just return to the softness in your belly and allow yourself to be fully present with that, with whatever it is that you feel. And now from here, we can all be here together with a little bit more presence. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful. I would like to remind the audience that we want you to submit your questions using the Q&A function. And then we'll have a brief conversation and start taking questions. Reverend Angel, we talked the other day about this sort of collective experience we're all having, all from very different places, depending on, you know, where you live, your age, your life experiences, you know, are you a man, a woman, are you a person of color? It's a different experience for individuals, but it's still a collective experience. And we talked about this idea of reconciliation, reconciling this moment. Can you share a little bit more about what's, you know, what you're hearing from people and what we're all sort of experiencing together in different ways?
Yeah, you know, I feel that if, you know, people use many words as, you know, the different spaces that I travel in. I've held some sits. I've, you know, been on you know, big sits where, you know, 1,000 people coming and sitting together, small sits where people just come day to day, have a kind of almost daily sit. We call it the no big deal sit. But the thing that kept coming to mind, that kept rising from the bottom and coming to the surface, is that really what I could hear is that people were working for reconciliation. They were really trying to reconcile what this moment is for them. First with the global pandemic, because we are in this time facing something, all of us in different ways, as you said, Tara, you know, very different vector points, whether you have wealth or whether you don't have a place to shelter in, makes for a very different experience. And yet we're in a collective experience, kind of as close as we can get to, you know, just truly recognizing that we're all breathing the same air, we're all touched in different ways, and that air lands on us differently, but we are touched. So we're in this collective moment, and many of us are trying to reconcile. And so I think what happens is meditation and mindfulness become a way, I like to call them the pandemic drug of choice, that people can access a way in which to reconcile the confusion, the anxiety, the fear of the unknown. All of these are perhaps the things that human beings have the most difficulty navigating. And so mindfulness has created an opening and you know, given a lot more people access to a sense of possibility and ease in terms of reconciling challenging times.
Can you explain, you know, we talked about the fact that I think when I'm relatively new to mindfulness practices and to meditation. I've sort of had a very practical approach. I'm feeling anxious. I have stress. I can't sleep. This sort of problem solution approach to meditation. And we talked about what role can meditation play beyond that, and for these times, what other opportunities are there in meditation besides just sort of soothing our own anxieties?
Yeah, I think, you know, as we saw meditation kind of, you know, start to be, show up in different places, in schools, in, you know, in situations where people were navigating challenging experiences, particularly anxiety, you know, anxiety that comes from overwork, anxiety that comes from, you know, just life experience, anxiety from past experience, from trauma. what we ended up with is a lot of ways in which meditation entered and mindfulness entered as a solution, a problem solution situation where people were using it and are using it to fix something, to address something. And there's nothing wrong with that, because we should get the kind of ease, that we can from wherever we can, and kind of reduce our attachment to substances that would otherwise harm us. So we're not going to get harmed from meditation. But as you're pointing to, there is another way in which we use meditation that gives us a very, very different window of possibility to access. And that is to, rather than using meditation solely to address something, to fix something, which in some ways can actually create a mindset that something is wrong with you and that you have to be fixed, you can actually use mindfulness and meditation in the much more, I want to say, traditional way, which is actually to meet your experience exactly as it is and meet the conditions that you are in exactly as you are in this moment. And that's a really profound window into developing a capacity for greater trust, that wherever we are, we can actually meet our experience. But we do need some practice with that, because we have a lot of practice running away from our experience, trying to figure out what else it could be and why it should be different, which actually increases our anxiety. So to have a meditation practice, to have a mindfulness practice that allows us to meet ourselves, is to develop a capacity for trust in the goodness of who we are, and that what we have, whoever we are and wherever we are, that we can draw from our own seat of wisdom in order to move forth and make decisions from wherever that is.
So, a clarity. We talked about finding clarity through
Yeah.
mindfulness practice and using that to move forward and make the world a better place.
Yeah, what I think about is not so much, finding clarity, but actually recognizing that there is clarity there. We're actually pretty good human as a human species. There's some of us are a little bit off the chain. We won't talk about that, but fundamentally we are good. There's a basic goodness that we have. And so rather than finding clarity, which suggests that there is clarity someplace, and if I go on a journey, then I'm going to go and find that clarity. When we have a practice that turns our attention back to our own experience, so that we can meet difficulty, we can meet painful experiences, and where that lives in our body, where it is looping in our mind, when we can meet our own experiences, and we can actually just touch the pain, the heartbreak that we feel, the rage that we feel in injustice, for instance, as a result of George Floyd's death, and the expanding awareness that, in fact, we've had a 400-year pandemic, as many people are saying, of anti-Blackness and white supremacy, and the ways in which Black people and brown people are treated. And coming into that awareness can be very overwhelming if you don't have a way to reconcile it. And so to reconcile is not to fix it, but reconcile is actually to meet it, to integrate it, so that your own clarity that already exists in who you are becomes more aware to you. It becomes more apparent to you. So you become aware of your own fundamental goodness, your basic goodness, and your own possibility to have clarity, even in the face of challenge, even in the face of these extraordinary times, through a practice that lets you just meet yourself as you are.
And building on that, and we're going to go into questions in just a second, but when we had an earlier conversation, I talked about my own sense of, the weight of all this and the grief, and you wake up and you see, hate speech and hateful tweets and horrible crimes and racism, and you feel overwhelmed and you feel powerless. And you had a really fascinating response to my question. I heard this from a lot of people about feeling powerless right now. And I do you remember what you said to me?
Yeah, the powerlessness, the escape it's an escape, and it's a copping out. And that's why when you have a practice that invites you to move more directly into your experience, you actually confront, the way that I like to talk about it is your skin in the game. there's many of us that our daily experiences don't have us confronting, a cop coming at us in a way that is anything other than friendly. Our daily experiences are such that maybe we're comfortable, we have a good home to live in, but we're very, very much connected, and it takes extraordinary amount of effort and energy to avoid the experiences that's happening around us. And so helplessness, powerlessness is one of the ways that we kind of sneak into a little place and go, oh, I can't do anything about it. And the fierceness, there's a softness to meditation that allows you to go, oh, I can meet myself. I can meet this painful experience. I can meet the fact that I don't know what to do about this. But there's also a fierceness in it that says you have to show up to what is happening, and you have to feel what you are feeling about this rather than escape and check out into powerlessness. And so I think that what comes as a result of that is when we finally slow down enough, and when we finally allow ourselves to have the conditions that where we really touch what we're experiencing, what arises for most of us is the experience of grief. We recognize that grief is there. And grief is our path to reconciling confusion. Grief is our path to reconciling the anxiety. Grief is our path to reconciling the overwhelm. When we allow for grief, then everything else that is being held back by our unwillingness to face what is true becomes very possible.
Well, it was incredibly helpful to me. I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I appreciate that you were so direct, and I hope that the people listening benefit from it. This is the first time I've heard anybody talk about the fierceness of meditation, and I love that. I love that. I always learn something with you. So let's talk. I want to remind our listeners that toward the end of this conversation, I'm seeing some questions from people asking if you're going to do a longer practice. And yes, that is ahead. So let's answer some questions, and then we will have another sit. Is that the right way to?
Yeah. I'll say something about that sit term, but yeah.
It is the right word or no? Somebody asked if we would have a longer sit.
Yes, we will have a longer sit.
I hadn't heard that before. All right. Jules asked, what is your best or favorite technique for quieting the mind during moments of rest or meditation?
Yeah, so I'm going to share it. I'm going to share a practice. I actually avoid and move myself and move people that I'm connected with away from the idea of quieting the mind. And that's exactly what Tara and I are talking about, that much of the ways that we've heard information given about mindfulness and meditation is some form of kind of like wrangling ourselves into control, like wrestling our mind so that it's not doing the bad thing we're supposed to do. That just reinforces the notion that something's wrong with us, something's wrong with our mind, that, if our mind is, going here and there, that is inherently a problem, and that makes us a problem, because if it's our mind, it makes us a problem. So I'm going to invite a practice that actually does a little bit of something different than quieting the mind. We're going to let the mind do what it does. And so we'll get to that when we do.
Oh, great. Okay. So stay tuned. A question related to protest and activism. George asked, meditation and mindfulness gives me inner peace. Going to protests and rallies with difficult interactions are stressful, to say the least, but necessary. For me, each is at a different end of the spectrum. Can I bring the two closer together? So inner peace versus activism.
Yeah, I think that we have ideas about inner peace that somehow, as you said, George, lives on this spectrum away from activism. When we deepen our practice and we allow ourselves to have a practice that lets us feel rather than lets us fix, that lets us meet rather than has us create solutions, what we end up doing is we carry that meditation practice, we carry that inner peace with us right into the fray of protest, right into the fray of challenge, right into the fray of friction. We carry that inner peace with us. It does not diminish our fire. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. It doesn't diminish our fire. What it does is actually give us a sense of clarity to be able to see what is ours to do, what action is ours to take. It doesn't mean that you get all the things right. It doesn't mean that everything turns out the way you'd like it to. It means that you're able to take the actions that you take with a kind of conviction that's drawing from that seat of wisdom, that place of clarity, inner peace. I would call it that place of love. that you're able to have your actions actually start from, I say, your seat of love, rather than what many of us are doing is when we go to practice, protest, we intellectualize, and it becomes all about our ideologies, our theories, like who's bad, who's wrong. And if we integrate our practice, if we allow our practice to be integrated, we become actually more complex, right? We allow for the nuances of what arises in any situation in which there's somebody on one side and there's somebody on another. I'm not saying that we don't continue to flex our muscle and push against the things that are unjust, because we absolutely should. And I'm going to encourage people to actually absolutely continue to. But we can do that with a rootedness that also allows us to see the people as human beings that are on the other side and get more complex, and to actually enter into our protests, enter into our pushback in a way that doesn't consume us. Because if we're going into a way that is consuming, that is stressful, that's anxiety producing, it will quickly become so overwhelming to you that it's not going to be something that you're going to want to do. And then you'll run away from justice, rather than knowing that justice is the calling that invites every single one of us into wholeheartedly.
I think this is the challenge right now. We're so overwhelmed by the news cycle, by the tweets, by the videos, by the images, by I know so many people who say, I just have to stop watching. It's hard to watch. I know people who said, I can't watch the George Floyd video. Mm-hmm. I watched it. I feel like I have to watch it. But it's very difficult. That seems to be the constant tension we have right now, wanting to be engaged and wanting to retreat, because it's just so, so anxiety provoking.
Right. And I think that that's because we haven't developed, and I want to say this is especially true for people that have lived their lives in a construct that is defined by whiteness, that keeps them safe and keeps them with a veil away from the experiences that have been happening, not just May 25th with George Floyd. Has been happening for decades. It's happening for hundreds of years, right? It's not happening in the same way. We don't have people enslaved in that same way, but we've had injustice, and we've had anti-Blackness, and we've had this kind of stratification of values, of value of people, which is where Black Lives Matter comes from, that has kept us from actually acknowledging how deeply wrong that is. And I think that many of us are that have lived kind of a little bit outside of a real confronting of that are overwhelmed. And that makes sense, because your nervous systems are not toned to actually hold that. And what meditation practice does, and I want to also give a plug for yoga, is that it actually helps us to be able to tolerate discomfort, to tolerate the discomfort that we feel when we confront like how much information there is, how much hate there is, how much agitation there is. It actually builds our capacity. But the only time that it works to build our capacity is when we're not using it to fix things, when we're using it instead to meet things. So when we meet it, what we experience and what we recognize is actually, I can actually make room for this. I can take this in. This feeling of discomfort, rather than running off someplace and feeling like, oh, I can't possibly take that. Actually, I have more space if I just plant myself here and return to myself over and over again. I have way more capacity than I think I do. And I think that that's how we integrate what is it that is ours to do in the face of this challenge, and how do we also do that in a way that doesn't consume us so that we just disappear completely.
And as you pointed out to me, it's a luxury to say, I'm overwhelmed by this. If you have skin in the game, you can't retreat. You can't say I'm powerless. If you have a Black son or a loved one, and if you're a person of color, you don't have the luxury to say, I have to turn off the news, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, the news is your life, actually. I mean, you walk around and you move around in the world, and, your life is the news. For many of us, what we're looking at is like, oh, that's the news. For a lot of Black and brown people, it's, in fact, that's their life experience.
Right.
What you're seeing on the news is people's life experience. It's been kind of, pushed under the rug, and we deal with it. But we also develop a capacity and a tolerance for it that, as you're saying, Tara, having the luxury, I would say the luxury, in some ways, the misfortune, It is we always talk about the luxury and the privilege of it, but there's a misfortune in having a kind of disconnect that doesn't allow you to really recognize what's been present here all along. And so meditation also gives you greater capacity so that you can reclaim the parts of yourself that have been suppressed over, decades and hundreds of years of a system that would have many of us not feel, so that we can continue to degrade certain people. So that's what I mean about the fierceness of meditation.
All right. Thank you for that. Kathy asked, how do I carry meditation into action, especially now wanting to support change? We've talked a little bit about that, but can you reiterate, how do I carry meditation into action?
Yeah, I think people often make their meditation sort of separate from their action. We absolutely need a place in which to return to remember ourselves, right? To remember our own wholeness and our own goodness. Otherwise, we get thoughts of, anxiety, frustration, anger, rage, and that's what we're driven by. So to have a regular practice that we return to is to create a solidity, the kind of like solid baseline that remembers ourselves as kind, that remembers ourselves as soft, that remembers ourselves also as vulnerable. And we can allow that vulnerability in. It allows us to remember ourselves as really experiencing pain in the midst of this. And so when we have a practice that's situated in, as I keep returning to, meeting ourselves, you don't have to bring that meditation in with you. It comes with you. It comes with you to your protest. It comes with you in action. It comes with you with your conversations with your lovers and your partners and your friends. But it needs to be, regular enough and rigorous enough that it is starting to permeate your life. So as long as you don't put a wall between your practice and your life, that practice is going to be everywhere and permeated throughout your life.
When you talk about regular enough and rigorous enough, is there a schedule should we have a practice every morning, a couple times a day? What are your thoughts about how to incorporate a practice into our daily life?
Yeah, a lot of people think about practice in terms of this like long periods of time. So we're like, okay, when am I going to find 45 minutes or a half hour and I'm going to practice? And until the pandemic, we know what our life, I don't know about you, but, my life feels like fuller and busier, since the pandemic.
Right.
But most of us can't fathom, given all of the things, especially if we're adults, especially if we have children, especially if we have jobs, where we're going to cut that out. So we end up with this battle with like trying to carve out time for this practice. And that's kind of treating it like, the many different, hobby things or, choices that we have. If instead we practice, we have a practice that's more like a necessary hygiene, right? It's like spiritual hygiene, you can call it spiritual hygiene, mental hygiene, just heart hygiene. I don't care whatever you want to call it. It's hygiene. And you treat it like hygiene so that it is regular and it is repetitive and that you return to it over and over again. So I highly suggest that you have a practice that is almost daily. All the deities took a day off, so almost daily. And it is short enough. I suggest, just thinking about it being a 5-minute practice so that you can simply build the tolerance where at some point the 5 minutes won't be enough for you. You'll sit into 6 minutes and 7 minutes and 10 because it won't be enough for you. Like the person that asked in the beginning, are we going to have a longer sit? Because your body begins to actually desire and have a thirst for feeling that sense of ease. That is an amazing way to start your day. I really recommend starting your day if you can. It's a little bit more challenging when you have like everything running and you're kind of, careening to the end of the day. So if you can, get up, get your bed clothes off, because we think bed clothes, we think sleep. So get your bed clothes off. And I always say before you brush your teeth, go and have a sit. We say sit, but sit means it doesn't mean it's not about your physical ability. Sit means just seated meditation. Sitting down for your internal time, right? Sit down for your internal time. So in the morning, preferably, if you can't and you get past the day and you're like, whoa, I didn't do my sit, I didn't do my meditation, I haven't had my mindfulness, then go ahead, do it anytime you can. But regularly Try it for 5 minutes a day. Don't worry about a clock. Don't worry about the tyranny of time. If you feel like, oh, I got to get up, I need to be done one time, let it pass. Two times, let it pass. Third time, go ahead, go on wherever you have to go. I find that that is the most potent way, natural and organic way for us to develop a regular practice.
Okay, let's do a couple more questions before we take a moment. A listener asked, how would you respond to a person who thinks mindfulness is too self-absorbed? For activists focused on helping others, how can they see value in focusing on themselves?
Yeah, I don't think of mindfulness. I personally don't think of mindfulness as focusing on myself. I think of mindfulness as creating the conditions so that I can face the world to do the work that I want to do in the world that keeps me whole. And if I begin to separate myself from what it is that I'm doing in the world, then I'm already off track, right? I do the work that I do in the world because I'm connected to the people that I do work on behalf of, but I'm not disconnected from them. So my meditation, my practice is actually my contribution to my fierce work in the world. It's my contribution to the people that don't have equitable circumstances. It's my contribution to saving the planet. It's my contribution to all of the things that I care about. And I have to be as whole as I possibly can, as resilient as I possibly can, in order to do that in a way that allows me to be fully present. It is just true that the way that the body works is if we're depleted, if we're depressed, and if we're really down, that we respond with more aggression, we respond with more fear, we respond with more anxiety. So it's a practice not of being self-absorbed. I think it's a practice of being us-absorbed. I become absorbed in the work that is necessary for all of us. And that's the way that I would say.
I think it's super relevant for right now because I've been saying, self-care, right now, self-care is community care. Wearing a mask is caring for others. So many of the lessons we're learning right now during the coronavirus pandemic, during the Black Lives Matter, more attention on Black Lives Matter. I know it's been here, but we are learning that the things that that our lives are so interconnected. And that it's almost hard to be self-absorbed because everything we do has such a ripple effect on the people around us. I think it's important, and I think learning that through mindfulness is important. I have a question from Stephen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to add too is that maybe this is a little richer, but there's something really potent about being willing to resist the notion that we always have to be busy and doing something in order to have value. We live inside of a system that tells us that the only way we have value is if we are doing something. So to quote unquote do nothing is not valuable. And I really invite people to steal back a little bit of a space for yourself to just be, that you deserve that. And that when we do that, we start to unhook ourselves from a culture that continues to drive us and drive us and drive us. And as we can see with the advance of technology, that culture is not going to stop. And it is our work to do to take that time back for ourselves as a contribution to everything that matters, to have the space to even figure out what matters to us. And that's what I do with my meditation.
Here's, I think, an important question from Stephen. I'm a Black queer man struggling in virtual sits with my predominantly white Zen center, where the exploration of whiteness has now taken over the whole space without consideration that not everyone is white. What should people of color do in these instances? And I do think this speaks to the larger issue of the sort of whiteness of not the whiteness of the movement, but the apparent whiteness of the movement, that there's a lot going on, but we tend to see and reach out to the sort of white mindfulness movement. Can you talk more about that and what we should advise Stephen?
Yeah, Stephen, go find yourself a BIPOC space. For those of you that don't know, Black, Indigenous, people of color space, because white folks have to do what they have to confront this moment. Everybody is in their moment of confrontation with like what they didn't know. And I don't think that we can, in any kind of reasonable way, we've been asking folks, I'm talking to you, Stephen, right here, right? We and all folks of color, all Black folks, we have been asking white people to go and do your work. right? To go get educated, to go and understand the conditions that surround you. And so we can't then, and this moment and that we've asked them to do that, and now they're like, okay, whiteness, and they can even say the word whiteness. I said white supremacy and everybody's head didn't fall off. We can't then say like, okay, now you can't talk about that. So you take care of you, Steve, and that's doing that self-care and saying, I'm gonna go and connect with some, Black, Indigenous people of color, or some spaces that are, sufficiently mixed that whiteness and the conversation about whiteness doesn't have to take up the whole space. You can come and sit with me. And there's lots of other spaces that I'm happy to direct you. So I highly recommend folks of color, you're out there. Y'all know we have been asking people of color to do this work. We have been asking them to show up. We've been asking them to put their bodies on the line, and they have done that. We can't kind of snatch it back now in this moment, and we actually need them to continue, but they have to be where they are. They're not in the same place that we are. Integration is a human experience, and so everyone has to do their work from exactly where they are. So you get what you need and go into the spaces that are going to allow you to do your own healing work that comes from the particular social location you have at this time. And that's true for women in spaces that predominantly men. That's true for trans folks that are in hetero spaces and all of the things, right? All of the binaries. It's time for us. We have the internet, we have Zoom. Put some word out there and go in the spaces that allow you to be safe and allow you to be whole.
I want to sneak in one very quick question, and then we need to get to the practice. Allison asked, do you have advice about how to introduce mindfulness to young children so they can grow up recognizing that clarity? What do you say to children, how to get children started?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. Actually, the thing that I was suggesting before about the 5 minutes is that I got that out of working with children, to actually not put some kind of really fixed time and not introduce a whole lot of belief, right? But actually to have young people be able to turn their attention to enjoying what it means to just give themselves full attention. We often use the breath and counting with children. That's a really good way to have them count their breath and to give them the instruction that if they can count their breath and get up to 10, then they can just take their breath in and count 1, and then count their breath in, out, and then 2, and then to do that and let them just go through the whole thing, but then let them know that if they start thinking about kitties or rabbits or whatever it is that your kids are thinking about, that they start all over at 1 again. And they kind of get into the focused attention of it and the game of it, realizing like, oh, I thought that too. But the main thing is don't prescribe any fixed ideas of like how much time they have to do it. Let them just come and sit by you when you do it. And maybe I would say that that's probably the most important thing, is to invite your children to sit with you. That's how we talk about meditation in a quick way, is to let them sit with you, let them do practice with you and see you do it, invite them. And when they want to run and take off, let them go ahead and run and take off, and invite them again and again and again, just like you invite your own mind back to meet itself.
That's actually really useful and practical advice. Thank you for that. We went a little late on the questions. I would like to go ahead and have you lead us now in a sit. We talked about 10 minutes, maybe a little shorter than that. We're not supposed to go past 1:45, but if we go a few minutes past, it's not a problem. I think everybody will want to stay and be with you. So I'm going to go now. I'm going to come back at the end of it and wrap up and give you guys some resources. We're going to talk about some homework. So stay with us, and then I'll see you guys in a bit, and I'm going to enjoy this learning experience as well. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much. So this is a really, I call this practice the point, and I've been doing it for a while and sharing it with people, and has been particularly useful and helpful for people during this time. I think the simplicity of it is something that anyone can do, including the children. And it's got this very, very basic set of instructions, which is you're going to choose a point. The point that I choose is my breath as it rests in my belly. So my breath can be lots of places. My breath can be at the tip of the nose. A lot of people think about that, or I can feel my breath here at my lips. But what I'm going to invite you to do is to actually place your attention awareness, that's what I call it, attention awareness, on your breath as it rests in the belly. That means that you're going to have your attention kind of press your breath down to sit right there in the belly. I could show you, it's kind of like you're going to even stand up here, right, a little bit below your navel, right? So right below your navel, that's what I mean when I say belly. You could even say core, right? So at the core, and you'll feel your breath as we begin. You're going to feel your breath moving, and it'll kind of move, and you'll feel it in your chest, and you'll feel it at your lips, and you feel it in your nose. And with each out breath, you're going to invite the breath further down and further down until the breath is resting right in the core of your belly. And so that's going to be what we call point. So you can just start that now, feeling the breath as it finds its way. You can let your eyes soften. You can turn your attention inward so you can just kind of like feel and hear your breath inside your body as you sort of coax the breath down to rest in the belly. So that place of your breath resting in the belly is what we call the point. That's the point. That's the point where we're going to have our attention awareness. Oftentimes people talk about focus, but focus becomes a little bit too tight. So we're just going to say attention, which invites the idea of it is very specific. It's a very specific place. And it's intentional place, but there's also awareness that allows for a little bit more room. It's more accommodating and more spacious. So attention awareness. So when the breath comes up a little bit as it rises up in the belly, we can have the awareness of that rising up, and we don't have to force the breath back. So just attention awareness. We feel the breath resting at this point. And that's where we allow our attention awareness to just rest. And the in-breath, the out-breath, still resting on point. And as you're resting on point, you will notice that at some point your attention and awareness will go elsewhere. And we call that other than point. So the very simple practice is that whenever you notice that your attention awareness is other than point, you simply pick it up gently, firmly, repeatedly, and bring it back to point. And as we feel our breath resting with point, I'll invite you to notice that everything else that is not resting in the belly is other than point. So planning is other than point. Thinking about the clock is other than point. Wondering if you're getting it right is also other than point. Simply rest at the point of your breath as it rests in the belly. Perhaps you'll notice sound. And it's this moment you can come back to point. Perhaps you'll notice an itch or some other sensation. Come back to point. The breath resting in the belly. some thoughts will arise that are pleasant. You can come back to point. Emotions arise that are challenging or painful. You can also come back to point. Just noticing that anywhere else your mind travels or attention travels is other than point. Pick your attention up and bring it back to point. We'll end by taking 3 breaths with intention. An in-breath and an out-breath. And the second in-breath and an out-breath with a little more force. And if you can, the last one with a sound, in-breath. Releasing tension and energy. And I always like to seal, what I call seal my practice, to make a distinction between formal practice and engaging the world so that there's an appropriate boundary between that internal focus and attention, awareness, and relating to the external world. And so you can, as you wish and whatever feels right to you, can touch your heart. You can bring your palms together. Some of us do that. You can touch the earth. Reach down and touch the earth. You can touch your hands on your palms. If you feel like you need it today, you can give yourself a hug for containment and self-soothing. With that, I'll bring it to a close. Thank you so much for your attention.
And thank you so much for that experience. I hope we can have you back and do this again. I really think there's a hunger for this kind of inner work. People really do want to learn. And so thank you for sharing you with us. I appreciate it a great deal. I want to close by telling people a little bit about how they can find your work, and maybe you can give us some homework. So let's start with your books. You're the author of Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. So you can look up this book, Radical Dharma. There's a second book. What is your second book?
Yeah, my first book, which is Being Black, Zen and the Art of Living with Fearlessness and Grace. I highly recommend the Radical Dharma has been called the book for right now. We wrote it just about 4 years ago, and it is the book for right now. So exactly the conversation we're having is what that book with my co-authors is about.
Okay, I'm looking forward to reading it and exploring it. Maybe we can talk about that again. And then we talked about, well, you can also start with Reverend Angel's website, angelkyodowilliams.com, very easy to find, and you can sign up for her newsletter, which I've done, and learn more about her appearances on Twitter at Zen Change Angel. Best Twitter name ever, at Zen Change Angel. Tell us more about, we talked about the Great Radical Race Read and some other homework you want to give us. So can you leave us with some homework so we can continue this journey?
Yeah, I have 2 pieces of homework for everyone. First of all is I want to tell you and remind you that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with you. There's nothing fundamentally wrong. There's a whole lot that's going wrong with the world, but there's nothing wrong with you. And I invite you to, as you go through the rest of your day, to see how many times that you can notice that your attention has gone into some place that I would say is other than point, when you're ragging on yourself, when you're ragging on other people, when your energy is someplace else other than simply resting in the goodness that is you, and presence and focus on whatever it is that you need to be paying attention to in the moment. See how many times that you can notice your other than point, and you don't have to judge it, just like we didn't do in the sitting experience. You don't have to judge it. You can just pick your attention up and bring it right back to point, to meet your emotions, to meet your challenges, to also meet your joy, to meet your passion, to meet your love, to meet your hope and your sense of possibility. And one sense of possibility that I'd love to offer to people is we are just now getting the message out about the Great Radical Race Read, is what we're calling it. It starts off with a 12-and-a-half-hour readathon on July 5th, and then a 5-week summer read that starts on July 15th, but you can register right now at greatradicalraceread.com. And what it is folks coming together, to read and to learn more about what is going on in our world, particularly around race, and particularly around all of the things that we're confronting in the uprisings, but to do it together, because what we like to say is that none of us learned racism alone. We didn't learn anti-Blackness alone. We didn't learn white supremacy alone. We cannot unlearn it alone. So grab somebody, colleagues, friends across the Zoom spectrum, all of the places that you're connected to, and bring them along and form a team for the greatradicalraceread.com. That's where you can find it. And I hope to see you there. And maybe y'all can join me later when you sign up for my newsletter, and you might even get to enter and hang out with us in the Liberated Life Network. So it's been really great to see you. Tara, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much. And let's do that website one more time, the Great Radical Race Read website. What is it again?
Yeah, greatradicalraceread.com, or you can just go to bit.ly/gr3 get in.
Okay.
Raceread.com.
Okay, I hope everybody joins. I'm going to. I want to thank you for joining us today, all of the listeners, and our thanks especially to Reverend Angel. I have so much appreciation and gratitude. Thank you for being with us. We know many of you will have a holiday weekend ahead. It's going to be an interesting July 4th. I hope we're all going to think more about what this holiday means and what it doesn't mean. Was it certainly not an Independence Day for everyone? Would you agree that July 4th is a time of reflection, perhaps?
Yeah, that's why we're starting the Great Radical Race Read with July 5th, an Interdependence Day readathon, so that we can recognize actually, and as the pandemic has shown us, that we are interdependent. And it's time for us to really step into that, so that each of us can be, not so we can do good for other people, so actually we can really reclaim the wholeness of ourselves.
All right. Thank you. And our next Living Well virtual event will take place in 2 weeks. We're going to take a break next week. So we'll be back Monday, July 13th at 1 p.m. And this event will be available, the recorded event. So share it with your friends. You can go to timesevents.nytimes.com/past and find the recorded event. I'll tweet it at Tara Parker Pope. Reverend Angel can tweet it. So follow us and you can get the recorded event and share it with your friends, and do that again and again if you'd like. To find out more about our full slate of digital events, please visit timesevents.nytimes.com. There's really something for everyone, as I think we've shown today. So it's all free, so check it out. We want to give a special thank you to all of our subscribers. You make our work possible. I look forward to talking to all of you again in 2 weeks. Reverend Angel, just thank you so much. What a joy to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll be back soon.
Great.
I'm going to come watch you. Yeah.
See everybody. Bye.